out there, and welcome back to Kurt's Place here on YouTube. In this video, we're going to talk about how to build your own arcade machine from the ground up. Basically, this video is going to tell you about how to make your own arcade machine from the ground up, basically starting from the computer and working your way up to the actual arcade machine construction itself. Now, the thing to keep in mind about this video is I'm going to discuss how I built my computers that work in my arcade machines. Understand, you can buy computers, you can have computers built for you from various manufacturers you're going to find online. Alienware, it's also some computer stores you can go to that can also build you a computer that will probably run your arcade machine pretty efficiently as well. I'm just basically showing you how I made computers, basically from day one when I started building these machines to the present day that we have now. I'm going to show you basically how I started out with this computer. I basically went to my computer store and bought a computer case that looks just like the one I'm going to show you here. Okay, as you can see in front of you right here, I basically have a computer case. Now this basically is a standard case that basically I bought at the computer store. Now usually when you buy these cases, things are included are like things like the buttons to power them on and off are included. There's also things inside like to mount your hard drive and things like that. There's also normally there's a power supply in the back with an on and off switch, and sometimes there's a fan. Now basically everything else you pretty much have to install yourself in these, and that's basically one of the great things about building your own computers. You have many options. Now one thing I really like about these cases, and you're going to be able to find these at computer stores that you go to that they have, is this particular case is one of the things that's really nice about it is on the back. If you notice in the back here, there's screws that usually go in here. One thing I like about these cases is you take out these two screws on the back. On the back here, two screws come out, and the cover just lifts right off. It makes it real easy to get inside to work on the computer and add things. Now you're going to notice in this basic photo right here, you have your basic computer inside here. And basically what you have in here is you have your power supply. It's basically in the back. You have your power supply back here. That's what this is right here. That's your power supply. You have your motherboard is down in here. This is your motherboard in here. Your processor is underneath this fan right here. And then also then you have your hard drive, which is mounted right in here. And then also up here, you can have your additional CD-ROM drives and various things that you might want to add. Now, I'm going to basically show you what I do to construct the core process of this computer. The actual motherboard that I use in this computer, right now most of my computers I use ASUS motherboards. I have found this to be extremely reliable. I have one of these in my original arcade machine right now, and it's almost 10 years old now. And it's still going strong, and I haven't had any problems with it. So ASUS is the main place I use for my motherboards. Basically the same motherboard as this. It does vary depending on the size of the computer and the specs that you want to have. But when you go to your computer place, you can basically ask them about ASUS motherboards, and then they'll basically say which one works. So far now, I've built almost 12 computers that use this ASUS motherboards, and I haven't had any problems at all with them. They've been outstanding motherboards for these applications, building these arcade machines. Inside the computer, you're going to notice that one of the things I was talking about inside the computer is basically installing an auxiliary graphics card. Now, if you look inside this computer, I'm going to try to show this to you. See this right here? This is what I meant. This is what I meant when I said auxiliary graphics card. This right here, this piece right here, this is an auxiliary graphics card. This is not your standard issue graphics card inside here. You can see it pretty well from this shot right here. Right where that little fan is inside there, right where my finger's pointing here, that's the graphics card inside there. Let me see if I can give you a better angle of it. Okay. Yeah, right here. This section right here that has this fan on it, this basically up here, this is an auxiliary, this right here is an auxiliary video card. It has its own fan and everything that runs on it. Some of the more powerful ones even have their own power supplies that actually run this video card. Now, I have discovered that the motherboard that comes with the computer, it can run the games okay by themselves. But when I try to run Hyperspin, the one thing that I found out is when I try to run Hyperspin, I have found that the motherboard needs additional graphics power. It just doesn't, the AMD processor, it can do a good job running the games, but basically as far as running the Hyperspin and everything's concerned, it really needs more power if you want to have it run silky smooth like what I have back here. Now the next question you're probably asking yourself is, what sort of things, once I get my motherboard and everything set up in my computer, I have everything installed, what type of hard drive do I use? Now I prefer, my computers are somewhat older. I basically use Western Digital hard drives in all my computer pretty much to handle all the needs that I have. They vary in sizes depending on how big the computer is that I use. Now the actual processors that I use, all my computers use AMD processors of one speed or another, just depending on the size cabinet I'm building and the type of programs that I'm going to run. Now I'm going to also show you what basically I use as far as keyboards and other things go for the arcade machines. Okay. Okay, all my computers basically use your standard mouse, basically just a regular Microsoft mouse, and they also use a keyboard, a standard keyboard. Now the one thing about my keyboards that are different, when you buy the interface to work your joysticks and everything for your arcade machines, the one thing that I do recommend is I recommend that you try to get a keyboard with a connector that looks like this. Not a USB, but a regular connector. The reason being is when you buy the X-Arcade control board, which is what you use to control the actual arcade panel itself, this is what the interface cable looks like that comes with that. Basically, when you buy the X-Arcade machine, you buy the control panel. That's what powers, that's what takes all your keyboard strokes, turns them into strokes that you use on your arcade control panel that you can build or you can buy. When you buy the kit to actually do the X-Arcade, this is what you're going to get. It's going to come in a box, and it's going to look just like this. It's going to be a board just like that. It's going to have many, many connectors and things on it. And this basically, all these connectors on here, basically these right here, this is where you connect all the jumper cables and everything that goes to the different things that you want to power. Your keyboard, these go to your fire buttons and joystick functions and various other things. This up here is for the interface cable. These two right here, this is the interface cable. This is what actually attaches inside the motherboard and inside the actual processor here, I was going to say, the interface board. This is what attaches. Now, if you notice on here, this right here, this is for the keyboard. This little one right here. Now, if you'll notice on here, this has a connector like this for the keyboard. You're going to notice that, if you remember I talked about connecting it up before, this cable right here and this cable right here, they go together perfectly, just like that. That's how you connect your keyboard to the X-Arcade control module that goes inside your control panel. That's what turns these basically into keystrokes. This basically, into the board that's inside the computer, basically takes keystrokes and turns them into things that your control panel can use, and that's basically how it works. It basically takes keystrokes and turns them into functions that your joysticks and things can use. And that's also how MAME also interprets the keys as well. You can program them a number of different ways, but the thing to keep in mind is when you connect the interface cable, this is what goes to the keyboard, and then this right here, there's a cable that runs from here. This goes down and plugs in the back of your computer, and this basically goes into the section. On my computers, I basically have this going into where the keyboard input would be on the back of the computer, and that's basically what powers all my arcade machines as far as getting them to work with the computer. This right here is one of the main things. When you buy the computer board that comes along with the game, okay, when you buy the interface board that comes with the game, you're going to receive several things when you buy that. One of the things I wanted to point out is that also I'm going to show you a trackball in just a second, but when you buy it, you're going to basically get a book that looks just like this. This is if you use X-Arcade. Now, I use X-Arcade interface controls on all my arcade machines, and I found them to be extremely reliable. I haven't had any problems at all in the number of time that I've been using them. Now, what you're going to find in this book is when you open up this book here, you're going to see that there's various things in this book here that tell you how to hook it into your PC. There's going to be things that tell you how to hook it into your PC. It's going to tell you how to use different things that you may have. You're also going to get a book here that will show you how to use the X-Arcade control stick, which I'm going to show you also as well. There's also things in here that are going to show you. There's also things in here that will show you. Let me show you. Hold on one second. Okay. The book that I wanted to show you actually is this one right here. This is one of the books that you're going to get when you buy that control module that I showed you. The interface unit for the keyboard, that's what you're going to get. This is a book that's going to come with it. Now, as you can see inside the book, this is going to show you everything you need to know, such as how to hook the interface boards and everything into your computer. You're going to have diagrams here. They're going to show you how to do that. There's also going to be a page on here that's going to show you where all your wires and everything connect. This is the interface board here. This is going to show you what all the wires and everything do, and this is going to show you how you wire them into the control panel. Now, the thing to keep in mind is that basically inside, when you wire the module inside the computer or your control panel, wherever you want to put it, I usually mount them inside the control panel. I'm going to show that to you later on. But basically, when you get the package, you're going to get wires that look like this. You're going to get a pack of wires that looks like this here. Now, if you notice on these wires, there's all sorts of different labels and things. These are the wires that basically, when you wire them in, this goes inside your control panel. Your control panel buttons that control your control panel basically go from the button that you're going to be using or the joystick through one of these wires and into that module that I just showed you. There's places where those plugs plug in there, and that's how you wire your control panel together to work with your computer. When you buy an X-Arcade setup, one of the nice things about buying an X-Arcade setup is, especially if you buy something like the tank stick setup, which I'm going to show you. I'm actually going to show you what that looks like so you can see what it looks like. Okay. When you buy this is called the tank stick. This is from X-Arcade Gaming. This is what basically I started with, and if you look on the Miss Pac-Man machine, this is the same control panel that's used on the Miss Pac-Man machine. Now, one of the things that makes this control panel really cool, I'm going to show you here in the video, is basically when you buy this control panel, it comes with everything you need to basically build an arcade machine if you have. If you don't want to build a custom control panel, this here is your next best thing. Basically, it comes with two joysticks, left and right joysticks. It comes with a trackball. I don't have it in here, but it does come with a trackball. It has the interface unit installed inside of it, and on the back of this control panel, you're going to have buttons for doing programming. You're also going to have a cable coming out, and that basically is what goes to your computer. The interface board that I showed you, that interface board is used if you want to build your own control panel. If you buy the X-Arcade control panel, everything inside is already wired in. You don't have to worry about wiring anything. All the buttons and everything come already wired. It also has another nice thing on the side is it has pinball buttons on the side. So if you want to make a pinball machine, you can use the pinball buttons as well. This is if you want to basically have a control panel. You don't want to have it. You don't want to build it yourself. You want to buy one already built. This I have found to be extremely reliable. Now, the one thing I did do differently on this is when you buy this comes with X-Arcade joysticks. I have discovered it comes with these 8-way X-Arcade joysticks. Now, there's something I've discovered about those. I have found that the X-Arcade has been very well constructed and that the joysticks work pretty well. But one thing I've discovered is when I try to use some of my shooting games and things like that, the responses were not quite as accurate as I wanted. So what I did on my machines, all my arcade machines, including the X-Arcade panel you see in my videos, those have all been upgraded. What I like to use is what are called Ls32 joysticks. This is called an Ls32 joystick. It has standard connectors on the back of it. Right here where you can connect it. All these wires that you have in here, you connect, and they go into that interface unit I just showed you. You can also basically have these mounted with bolts on top, and they're ball sticks. You can set them in either 4-way mode or you can have them in 8-way mode. 4-way mode would be used for games like Pac-Man. 8-way mode is used for some of the shooting games and things, and fighters that I like to play uses that 8-way mode. And you can see that these get very, very smooth movement. Now, I've had these in my arcade machines now. Some of them originally over 10 years, and I've never had a problem with these. They're Saimatsu Ls32 joysticks, and I highly recommend them. These are absolutely, they have made my arcade machines what they are. I wouldn't even think of building a control panel with that one. Now, I'm going to show you what basically, if you, when you buy an X-Arcade tank stick, as they call it, I'm going to show you what comes with it. You get the manuals that I showed you. Okay, you get the manuals that I showed you. Now, the one thing I didn't show you that was missing from the X-Arcade that I had is you're also going to get a trackball unit, which is this unit right here. If you buy the tank stick unit, you're going to get a trackball unit that looks like this. And on the back of the unit, there's going to be a connector, a USB connector. This basically is a trackball unit. On the back, there's going to be a connector on the back that basically goes into your computer. You can either connect it through USB connection, or you can go on through another connection as well. Now, the thing to keep in mind is on this one, I have basically modified this. When you buy this from X-Arcade, if you buy one separately, this trackball is absolutely wonderful. I love these. This is the X-Arcade trackball. It's not the cheapest trackball in the world, but you're going to find that for the money, it's a really, really good trackball. All my arcade machines use this. I've had very few problems with this trackball, and it's been very reliable. It's also extremely accurate on the pickup, and it works really well with all the main programs that I've had. Now, there's many trackballs that are out there on the market, and you may want to come up with something completely different, and that's fine. Remember, when you build an arcade machine of your own, you customize it however you want. There's things like spinners and things you can get for games like Arkanoid. You can pretty much do whatever you want. If you go online and check videos online, you're going to notice there's a lot of people that have custom control panels that they made. I'm going to show you a little later on in the video one of the control panels that I made. Now, also, when you buy these control panels, you're also going to get a disc that comes with it. Now, this disc right here, when I bought Max Arcade Tank Stick, this came with it. This is a game that basically has Midway classic games like Robotron 2084 and various games. This actually comes with the disc. So after you plug your control panel into your computer, now this is through the X Arcade Tank Stick I just showed you, the big control panel I showed you. You can basically hook this in, and basically you're ready to start playing on your computer. Now, what it's going to come down to is if you really want to build a full-fledged arcade machine, I'm going to show you what's involved in building a full-fledged arcade machine like the one that I have behind me. Okay. One of the things I was going to mention about too, like as far as the actual computer goes, people ask me questions about operating systems and various other things too. All my computers use, I'm actually using Windows XP 32-bit. It's an old operating system, but I found for my arcade needs, I haven't really needed anything more, and I've been able to get by pretty well most of the programs that I've run. I'm currently using MAME, MAME.139 is what I'm currently using right now to run my games. I use MAME 1.39, and then I also have the Hyperspin emulator as my front end. And I have found that this is a reasonably pretty good combination that runs most of the games that I need, and I found it to be pretty reliable. The one thing you're going to find when you're setting up an arcade machine is it's going to be a lot of trial and error. That's one of the reasons I went through the forums. There's a lot of places on YouTube that tell you how to set up a Hyperspin cabinet. It also tells you how to work with MAME. Learning how to use MAME does take some time, but you're going to find, I think that you're going to find it's a pretty awesome program to use. There's a lot of sites out there that will tell you how to work with MAME, where to download it, where to get things like the ROMs and everything else that run with it. And one of the things also you're going to find out is that when you build a computer, once you get your computer and everything running, if you like the games enough that you're playing with the X Arcade Tank Stick that I just showed you, you're going to kind of determine if you want to build an arcade machine. I'm going to basically show you how to build a machine behind me. We basically went over things involving the computer and how to set the computer and everything up. Now I'm going to basically go to showing you things on basically how to build your arcade cabinet itself. One of the things I like to have on my arcade cabinets, one of the basic things I like to have on these is, I'm going to show you in this video is, I use a basic standard arcade cabinet like you see here. Now, one of the things I suggest you do is, if you don't want to build your own arcade cabinet, you can buy cabinets that have been on Craigslist. You can go to TNT Amusements occasionally has cabinets that they sell on eBay online. They're basically cabinets that they can't do anything more with because either the monitors may be bad or the game may be too far gone to repair it. That doesn't mean you can't use the cabinet. What I would suggest you do is if you find a cabinet you can use, even if the monitor and everything doesn't work, remember when you make an arcade machine you can put whatever you want in there. I currently use in most of my arcade machines right now, if you look behind me, basically the monitor that you're seeing behind you, those are basically, all my arcade machines for the most part use Samsung monitors. I've been very happy with the performance of the Samsung monitors. I've used one of them in the oldest arcade machine I have downstairs. It's about 8 years old or so, and it's still working great. If you look basically at the monitor here, you're going to see that that's basically a computer monitor mounted on its side. They're Samsung monitors. For the actual top of the arcade machine, okay, we're going to start from the top and work our way down. When I'm actually up at the top, the marquees that you see on top of the arcade machines, those you can actually buy on eBay. I'm going to show you basically how I make a marquee. We'll start from there. Okay, the one thing I wanted to explain to you that is this mainly applies if you're buying an arcade machine that's already, a cabinet that's already been built and you just want to customize it to make it run on MAME. Now, one of the things I like to do is, one of the advantages of buying a previously built arcade machine is you don't have to do all the work of cutting it from the ground up and building the sides and everything else that go into it. On the internet, I basically find marquees just like this one right here, like this Robotron right here. You could buy these online. what I like to do is I basically put a fluorescent light in the back of this, and usually you can get fluorescent lights from various places on the internet. Basically, you just measure the length of your cabinet, and you buy a fluorescent light that works accordingly with it, and basically it just plugs in the power strip I have behind the arcade machine. Now, as you can see, if you put a backlight behind it, and you put a marquee behind it, it makes it look pretty good when you have that. So basically, it just depends on what game you're going to use and how basically big the marquee can be on the cabinet that you decide you want to build your arcade machine into. One of the options that you have when you do an arcade machine is most of the time when you buy an arcade machine that's used, you may have the bezel may be broken, the actual glass part that covers the monitors. Now you have two options. One of the options you have for building, and this includes the marquee in the back too. I usually like to take my marquees. I'm going to show you that first. I usually like to take my marquees, put them in between two pieces of glass like this, take two pieces of glass, and then basically I have the marquee here, and basically you have two pieces of glass right here, and basically then you just put the marquee in between the two pieces of glass like so. So basically your marquee is sandwiched between two pieces of glass. And then on a lot of the arcade cabinets that have the channel where the glass will install the marquee glass, usually if you get thin enough glass and mount the arcade bezel between here, then you can basically mount whatever bezel you want to. You're also going to find that when you buy these arcade cabinets, if you buy ones that have previously been used, one of the things you're going to find is that you're going to have several choices as far as what type of thing you would like to use to build the arcade bezels that cover the monitors. A lot of times when you buy empty arcade cabinets, the bezels are one of the things that they take out. Either they get broken or they're taken out and they're sold. Some of these bezels can be worth a pretty good amount of money depending on the machine they come out of. So normally the bezels, when you find them, they're usually not in the arcade machines when you get them. You can get lucky and find one, but normally a lot of times when you buy these machines, the monitors will be out of them. And things like the bezels will be taken out of them, the control panels will be taken out of them. These are things that you basically have to build somewhat yourself. But I basically have two options when you build arcade machines. You can either use plexiglass like this right here for the arcade bezels, or another option you have is you can use glass. You also use a sheet of glass. Now I basically have a place where I live called Banner Glass that basically cuts these glasses that I use. All my arcade machines basically, if you look at them from the top here down here to the glass, all those are basically glass. I have discovered that the reason I like to use glass, and basically what I use on this is if you look at my glass, you'll see that it's fairly thick. This is basically a 1/4-inch glass. This is really thick. This is glass that's really thick and designed to take a beating. The reason that's important on these arcade machines is when you have glass that covers such a wide expanse like the machine behind me, having longer glass is important because if you do that, you're going to find it's going to be more reliable. If for some reason you bump that glass with your hand or you bang into it by accident when you're moving the arcade machine, one of the things that can happen is that glass can break. And I'm telling you, I had a glass breaking on an arcade machine, and I got badly cut on my arm. I had a bad cut in my arm. It was an arcade machine that had a glass that had a crack in it, and I was not aware of that. When I moved the arcade machine, the bezel actually shattered, and I basically got cut in the arm pretty good, and it hurt. And I'm telling you, I wish I had never did that. So my advice is when you buy an arcade machine, if it has a bezel glass in it, take the glass out, look it over very carefully for cracks. Once you go ahead and you get your cabinet basically set up the way you want it, you have a marquee and everything inside, and then basically what you're going to do from the marquee down is you're going to want to also go ahead and put speakers in. Now, what I do on my cabinets is I basically go to one of the gaming sites that they have on there. X-Arcade used to sell these too. Basically, I use these little arcade speaker covers. These are basically little speaker covers. And then where the current speakers are in the arcade machines, I usually like to install my own aftermarket speakers. And basically, if you look up in the arcade machines, up in here, where these two holes are right here, there's left and right speakers. Those are basically stereo speakers that are basically covered underneath here. You can get speakers in any number of computer stores and things like that. And basically what I do is I mount the speaker inside. I have the bezel hanging down. I mount the speaker inside down. I turn it on side, and then that goes down through. And that's what basically provides the sound for my arcade machines. You can use the current, if you have an existing arcade machine that you bought, you can use the current speaker grill that I have. Just take the speaker that's out in there, put your own speakers in there, wire them to your computer, and that basically handles your sound needs. And then you got your sound. So basically now you got your sound coming out. You got your marquee, and then you go down to your monitor. Now your monitor is basically one of the things you have to determine if you have to mount a monitor in an arcade machine is You just basically have to take a measurement how much room you have to work with based on what area you have where the bezel goes. Once you have that area determined, what I use is when I mount my monitors, I just use a standard mounting kit like you would use on a wall, and then I just basically build an actual back piece, cross piece that goes to the back, and basically the mounting bracket mounts into that, and that's how I mount my monitors. And then I just basically move them up or down, and then I mount them into the sides of the cabinet. And that's basically how I mount the actual monitors themselves. Now, you're going to find out, if you remember I was talking about the control panel. Now, one of the options you have on the control panels is, if you decide you want to build your own control panel, you have a couple options. You can build your own control panel using that kit that I showed you. Remember I was telling you about the interface kit and everything that works with it? I'm going to show you what basically is involved in putting one of these interface kits in. I actually have a control panel that I have out of an arcade machine that I built. Now, this arcade control panel, I custom built this myself. All the arcade control panels, except for the Miss Pac-Man machine I have in my room here, those are basically all custom built from the ground up. I built those myself from the ground up. I discarded the ones that were on the machines because they were in really bad shape. And also, most of my arcade machines, because they're built from the ground up, except for the Namco Reunion cabinet, I'm going to show you that in my game room, all those machines pretty much are built from the ground up, and they use this control panel. I'm going to show you what it looks like. Okay, this right here, this is a custom control panel that I built, just like the one of the machine you see behind you. As you can see right here, it has the same setup that you saw on the computer, same setup that I showed you in one of my previous videos. Okay, has the 1-2 player buttons. Okay, right here, 1-2 player buttons here. Has the standard buttons down here. Has the joystick in the middle, and it also has a trackball unit, which is right here. Okay, trackball unit's right here. Now, if I flip this over, I'm going to show you exactly what's involved. If you remember, I showed you the interface arcade unit, the unit where the button's attached to. That's right here. That's the interface unit where the button's attached to. The X arcade control module. That's what that is right there. Now, if you'll notice, you'll see all my buttons and everything have wires that basically go from here into that control panel. My joystick, this one I showed you, is right here mounted in the center. That's the Ls32, and then I have the trackball mounted over here. And basically, I have bolts that hold this whole thing together. Now, what you're going to find is, if you want to build your own control panel, like this one here, this control panel right here, to build a control panel like this right here, this took a lot of practice. One of the things I'm very good about building is I'm really, really good working with plastic, metals, and woods. One of the things I learned in high school was I basically learned how to build things out of wood and everything, so I'm able to make these control panels from the ground up. Now, if you don't want to make a control panel from the ground up and you have an arcade machine that you bought that needs a control panel or doesn't have one, you can find control panels on the internet. I found some either basically like from Miss Pac-Man machines that are basically wired up and ready to go for the most part. You just basically have to put the interface unit in there and then wire all the buttons and everything into it. Now, I'm going to show you what the arcade buttons look like. One of the buttons, this is basically what the fire buttons and everything on the arcade machine looks like. As you can see, you have your fire button here, standard button right here. Then on the end of these, there's little micro switches. As you can see on here, these little micro switches, you can take these off and you can remove these. These are little micro switches that basically is on the side. And if you see they make noise, there's a connector inside. And basically, when you're ready to use these, what it does is these basically attach inside the connector. And that basically is how is your fire button. And then there's a wire that runs from this and goes into that unit that I showed you for the interface unit. That's how your fire buttons work. Your joysticks, they basically work the same way. There's little micro switches inside. They work the same way. There's wires that go from these, and they go into the interface unit. These work the same way. Now, most of this is used if you have an arcade machine that you're buying that needs a control panel, then you're going to want to wire an interface unit into it. Or you can buy one aftermarket off the internet in some cases, but you're still probably going to have to wire an interface unit into it if you want to use it. But on the actual connectors themselves, you're going to actually have, on the wire, you're going to actually have areas here where you attach wires. The wires that come with the interface kit that I showed you, you're going to get a bag of wires like these that come with the interface kit. This is basically, these connectors here are basically what attach to those switches and things that I showed you. Once you basically have that hooked in, then you're going to basically be able to inspect the rest of the cabinet, see what shape it's in. And once you have the bezel in place, you have the monitor in place, you have your monitor bezel glass in place, you're down your control panel, then everything down to the floor looks okay. But basically, you're going to more or less have the arcade machine that you need. Then it's just a matter of running the wires and everything from the interface unit on your control panel into your computer, wiring up your speakers and wiring up your monitor into the computer that you already made or that you already got. Now, if you really want to build your own arcade machine for your actual full-size arcade machine yourself from the ground up, that's a little more involved. I'm going to show you later on in my workshop some of the templates and things that I use, but I can tell you, the arcade machines that I currently use right now, I'm going to show you I currently use 3/4 inch plywood to build those. Let me show you. Okay. Yeah, on the machines that I currently have right now, I basically use 3/4 inch plywood. This is basically the thickness of plywood that I use. Now, this is if you're building an arcade machine of your own from the ground up. If you're building your first arcade machine, my advice would be just try to buy a cabinet that's already been. Try to buy a cabinet, maybe one that's from a Miss Pac-Man machine that they're not using anymore. You can get them pretty cheap, and basically go ahead and try to modify one of those into your own arcade machine first before you physically build an arcade machine from the ground up. You can do an arcade machine from the ground up, but I got to tell you, it's a pretty good amount of work. It took me almost 2 years to get my first one built from the ground up for raw wood. But if you really want to try to build your own, you can get templates and everything and plans off the internet. I usually use 3/4 inch plywood to build the arcade cabinets. Now, you can also get plans off the internet on basically how to build your own templates and everything in your shop, cutting out from pieces of plywood. Now, the one thing that I'm going to suggest is there's a lot of people that use stuff called MDF. It's basically it's kind of like having strands of wood and everything put together in a sheet. I don't use any MDF on my cabinets because I've run into two problems using MDF. I've actually gotten cabinets, my Namco cabinet that I originally had, the whole front of the cabinet was made out of MDF, and the problem that I have with it is once water and things get into the MDF, especially if you have it in a basement that has a lot of moisture, what can start to happen is that can actually start to delaminate, and the bolts and things can actually start to pull loose from the laminate. That's what happened to my Namco machine, and I basically did a complete remodel on it. What I did is I replaced all the panels that were deteriorated with this 3/4 inch plywood, and it worked out really well. The actual painting of the cabinet that I use, when I paint all my cabinets, they all use the standard, the same paint that I showed you earlier, the Rust-Oleum 2X Ultra Cover. All my cabinets are painted with the same paint. I very rarely change from that paint, just because of the fact I like the black look that the cabinet has. Now, one of the things you can think about, too, is if you notice on my cabinets, they're not full-size standing cabinets. Most of the cabinets I have are designed so I can basically sit down on my chair. If you'll notice they're not full-size arcade cabinets from the ground up. The reason I can't have cabinets I can stand on anymore is I personally have found, I don't know if it's my age or what, but I have a hard time now standing up in an arcade machine playing for 2 and 3 hours. I used to be able to do it when I was younger, but now I'm getting older. I actually like to have machines I can just sit in the chair at and play. So all my machines are basically made with the sitting down in mind, and that's one of the reasons why my arcade machines may look shorter than a lot of other ones, because of the fact they are custom cut down to the way that I like them. And that's one of the things I do. One of the things you're also going to notice is that I don't have any coin mix on my arcade machines. You can basically, if you want to install a coin mech, you can wire that interface panel I showed you into to accept a coin mech. Now, I have a control panel here. Okay, this is a coin door that I had bought off the internet. Somebody basically was selling on one of the pinball sites. They didn't have a machine use it on anymore, or it was an arcade video game they didn't have. You can basically wire this in, and this has got things like switches and various things in, coin mechs and things like that if you want to use real coins. Okay. Now, what I basically found out is when I wired these, I basically found I really didn't have any needs on my arcade machines, because basically the button on the control panel, that allows you to put credits on the machine. So I really didn't have a need to build one of these. There's nothing wrong with using them. I just didn't really have a need to build on my arcade machines, to put those in my machines. The one other thing that I was going to mention to you about building an arcade machine is, if you need to learn how to do all the things that I've talked about, even in more detail, you can get plans off the internet, off the web, on how to build an arcade machine from the ground up. They'll have full designs and everything on how to build one from the ground up that you can get. And what I usually go to is I usually go to Home Depot to buy my lumber and everything. I found Home Depot seems to be a pretty reliable source for buying lumber and everything, and that's one of the reasons that I tend to like to use Home Depot for all my building needs. Now, one thing you're going to also have to determine is you have to determine how much space you have for your arcade machine. You can buy larger cabinets depending on the space that you have. Now, the ones that I currently have right here, these are basically the same size as the an Namco cabinet that I originally built the first one from that's in my basement. I'm going to show you in one of my other videos. You can all, if you want to do games like fighting games and things like that, if you want to have like multiple joysticks, you know, if you want to have a setup like this. If you want to have a setup that uses something like this X-Arcade control panel here with the dual joysticks and everything, that's going to require a wider cabinet. So when you buy your cabinet, one thing you need to keep in mind is what type of games do you plan on playing. If you plan on playing two-player fighting games and things like that, this cabinet design that I have back here doesn't work well for those. It requires a wider cabinet. Now you can get wider cabinets, games like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and NBA Jam, games like that, games Smash TV, cabinets like that. You have other ones, Total Carnage. Cabinets like that can basically handle larger control panels if you want to do two-player fighting games. You're also going to be able to find that there's a number of places on the internet that also sell pre-made arcade machines. You can buy them pre-made. There's a number of places that do sell pre-made arcade machines that work well with MAME. Now, the one thing you're going to find out about some of these arcade machines is they're not cheap. One of the beauties of building your own arcade machine is when you get it done and your friends come over and say, hey, you know, isn't that arcade machine really cool? Yeah, I built that from the ground up. Isn't that great? You can take pride in knowing that you built an arcade machine from the ground up all by yourself. It's something that I've done for a number of years, that I've built arcade machines, and I've been very satisfied with the progress. Now, what you're going to find out is, depending on the type of machine you want to build, some of the things I gave in here, maybe you can use, maybe some you can't use. It all depends on your basic type of cabinet you want to build. This is just a basic guideline to show you how you can get started on building your own arcade machine. And I think if you do what I do, it took me about 2 years to get to the point where I was comfortable building my own arcade machine from the ground up. Now, if you remember, I told you about the Sinistar cabinet and everything that I had done. I had a basic arcade machine I was pretty happy with. The reason why I went with a arcade machine from the ground up is I found that the control panels and things were not angled the way that I'm comfortable with. When I found the Pac-Mania cabinet, that was perfect for me. So basically, that's why all my arcade machines now are basically patterned after the Namco Pac-Mania machine that I had down in my game